pleasure at this time to introduce to you the names of the 9 gentlemen who will join our present group of astronauts in preparing for flights in spacecraft programs which will follow Mercury.
Bob Gilruth, director of the Manned Spacecraft Center.
Mr. Neil A. Armstrong, Air Force Major Frank Borman, Navy Lieutenant Charles Conrad, Jr., Navy Lieutenant Commander James A. Lovell, Air Force Captain James A. McDivitt, Mr. Elliot M.C., Jr., Air Force Captain Thomas B. Stafford, Air Force Captain Edward H. White II, and Navy Lieutenant Commander John W. Young.
The new astronauts are all test pilots like the original 7, but with more engineering background. Also, they're a little taller, a little heavier, a little younger, and mysteriously, a little balder. Throughout the year 1964, the nation awaits the start of Project Gemini, the 2-man flights which will constitute the second stage of our march to the moon. We wait to hear the magical words that tell us Gemini is launched. It will be 22 months before the clock starts. Nevertheless, behind the scenes, Gemini pushes ahead, while the public's attention turns to other sights and sounds. As a big-talking young man who is a bad poet and an unproven fighter, Cassius Clay takes the world heavyweight boxing crown from Sonny Liston exactly as he promised. And another big talker, Chairman Nikita Khrushchev, is suddenly silenced by his comrades and sent to the sticks for displaying too much personality. While our astronauts remain earthbound, we fire cameras at the moon aboard Ranger 7 that send back 4,000 superb photos before crashing there. Suddenly, on October 12, 1964, Columbus Day, dedicated to the discoverer of America, Radio Moscow steals our thunder. We learn that Russia, while we're still training for 2-man flights, has orbited a team of 3 aboard a new model spacecraft called Voskod, meaning sunrise.
Captain Charles A. Bassett from Dayton, Ohio. Lieutenant Roger B. Chaffee, U.S. Navy, hometown Grand Rapids, Michigan, presently stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio.
Captain Ted Freeman of the Air Force, stationed at Edwards Air Force Base, hometown Lewis, Delaware.
Captain C.C. Williams, United States Marine Corps, stationed at Quantico, Virginia, hometown Mobile, Alabama.
We have now had a 3rd astronaut team in training for a year. Of the 16, these 4 will die before the first manned Apollo flight. In Vietnam, a mission of a few hundred advisors is becoming a U.S. Army of 22,000. The word escalation is now heard more often than space. We go into the new year, 1965, with a box of instruments called Mariner 4, well along on an 8-month journey to the planet Mars. President Johnson remarks in his inaugural address on January 20th,
"Think of our world as it looks from that rocket that's heading toward Mars. It is like a child's globe hanging in space. The continents stuck to its side like colored maps. We are all fellow passengers on a dot of Earth. And each of us, in the span of time, has really only a moment among our companions."
In preparation for Gemini, a new spacecraft, bell-shaped like Mercury but about half again larger, has been rigorously tested in 2 unmanned flights. McDonnell Aircraft, its builder, says it contains an estimated 1,230,000 parts, down to the last rivet. For the booster, we've man-rated an advanced and well-proven version of Titan, the Air Force's intercontinental missile, with half again the thrust of Atlas. We have named and are training the team for the first manned Gemini flight. Veteran Gus Grissom will be command pilot. A new appointee will be his co-pilot.
Navy Lieutenant Commander John W. Young.
It's a wonderful opportunity to be able to make a significant contribution to the United States, to research and development, and I believe in the long run to the human race as a whole. I couldn't turn down a challenge like that.
The world is duly informed that cigar-smoking John Young was born in San Francisco, educated in the South, has green eyes, draws cartoons for a hobby. He appears reserved, that is, down on Earth. In space, he will eventually show he dearly loves a caper. March 23rd is set for our first manned Gemini flight. On Pad 19, a new launch site in the sands of the Cape, men and machines labor to erect the new firecracker built by the Martin Company. Gus Grissom, mindful of the capsule that drowned on his Mercury flight, has named the new one Molly Brown, for the unsinkable lady of that name. But again, the front runner in the race turns around again to give us the Slavic sneer.
This is Radio Moscow.
5 days before the scheduled Gemini launch, a pair of Russians are launched in Voskhod 2 and rack up some new firsts. Colonel Alexei Leonov leaves the cabin to walk 10 minutes in space. The following evening, the new Vice President, Hubert Humphrey, Chairman of the National Aeronautics and Space Council, declares,
"This week's news from the Soviet Union should emphasize what we've already known all too well. Now, we know that outer space, which we hope and pray will be a peaceful laboratory, could provide the arena for what Winston Churchill once called the Wizard War. And if we're not strong enough in that so-called Wizard War, we are doomed. Each time that we pause, we have had shock from Soviet efforts in space, from Sputnik in 1958 to the man in the spacesuit of yesterday."
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Bolton liftoff. As your clock has started. You're on your way, Molly Brown. Yeah, man.
But now, finally, with a Titan's roar, we shoot our first two-man team into space. Against the pilot's wishes, but as planned, Gemini Titan 3, or GT3, is held to 3 modest orbits. But Grissom and Young rack up new achievements in qualifying the hardware. Never simply passengers, they fly the spacecraft like a plane. They shift from one orbit to another by starting up, or as they call it, burning their engines, swooping as low as 52 miles above the Earth.
The burn was 1 minute and 14 seconds, Bard. Watch this.
Such maneuvers must all be mastered if man is to steer himself to the moon. There's just one major departure from the preset flight plan: thinly sliced corned beef on rye bread, which a congressman would later attack as a $30 million sandwich. Wally Schirra tells the story.
And that was prepared the night before the flight, and then I took that to crew quarters and kept it in the refrigerator, gave it to John that evening, and we kept it chilled so there was no chance of it spoiling. And we've been eating these, I might add, regularly for months before this flight, and there were no dietetic problems that we could detect. So it was rather facetious the way the world made a big argument about it and embarrassed John Young and attempted to embarrass me too, I suppose. But after all, just because we haven't put on a spacesuit doesn't mean we have to stop eating normal food. We'd never last if we didn't have these little breaks in the routine.
John Young, still smarting from the criticism that followed.
No, it really wasn't for fun. It was to take a guy's mind off his work when he was really busy and in some kind of a difficult situation. That's what I used it for, and that's what it was for.
10 weeks later, June 3rd, 1965, we take another two-man sprint in space that cuts down Russia's lead considerably. GT4. Control of this flight after liftoff, and all subsequent flights, comes from the new Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston, Texas.
James A. McDevitt.
Flying to him was no boyhood passion. He came to it late, yet managed to win 9 medals flying 145 combat missions in Korea.
Edward H. White II.
Tall and thin, Ed White has the stern glance of a medieval saint and the bubbling spirits of a kid with a new bike. On the third revolution, tethered by a golden umbilical cord, carrying a propulsion gun in hand, Ed White eases his lean bones out through a hatch and plunges into space.
Okay, I'm out. Okay, he's out. Slow free.
For 22 glorious minutes, Ed White walks in space, doubling cosmonaut Leonov's stroll 11 weeks ago. The jet nozzle gun with which he maneuvers is itself an application of Newton's third law. Each time he fires it in one direction, he is gently nudged in the opposite direction.
Okay, I rolled off and I'm rolling to the right now. Under my own influence. There goes a... Looks like a thermal glove, Jim. It is, Ed. All right. Now I've come above the spacecraft. I'm coming back down now. I'm under my own control. Oh, there you are. Look at the camera on now. Okay. You're right in front, Ed. You look beautiful. I feel like $1 million. I will pick up.
Like the moon, he has himself become a satellite of the Earth as he orbits at a slow 17,500 miles an hour, while the Earth and all of us are circling the sun at almost 67,000 miles per hour. His talks with Jim McDivitt inside the spacecraft show no concern.
That problem, it's very easy to maneuver with the gun. The only problem I have is I haven't got enough fuel. This is the greatest experience I've...
A tragic experience awaits him 19 months from now. Ed White, who is romping so joyously in space, will die on the ground, imprisoned in a flaming Apollo cabin. Just now, with tragedy still far over the horizon, White and McDivitt rack up 62 revolutions, 1,600,000 miles. For the next manned Gemini flight, Gordo Cooper is teamed with a slim, slight bundle of brains and fun known to his friends as Pete Conrad. He barely missed appointment as one of the original 7. 2 trademarks identify him at once to the public: the space like a dash between his front teeth, and the fact that he is one of the few Princeton men to be tattooed.
And when I came in the ready room, everybody knew that I'd been trying for the program, you know, and they said, you had a person-to-person long-distance phone call from Houston, you know, and I said, yeah, sure, Charlie. And sure enough, it was Deke, and he asked me if I wanted to come fly for NASA. So, of course, I was so excited I didn't know what to do. I almost wrecked myself driving home in the car.
Such is now our ability to survive in space that Cooper and Conrad are scheduled for an 8-day, 121-orbit flight. But in Los Angeles, a week of rioting, shooting, and looting in a Negro ghetto called Watts indicates how poorly we manage on Earth. The American sky is still hazed with smoke from the fires of Watts on August 21st, 1965.
Gemini 5, have a nice trip, drive carefully.
Yes, have a nice trip and drive carefully. The preparations for the launch of Flight GT5 have gone so well that there's not one single second of Flight Day launch hold.
Gemini 5, this is Houston. We'd like to have you check your fuel cell O2, H2, heater, circuit breaker, please.
A main purpose of this flight is to test the highly sophisticated fuel cells, a device that replaces conventional batteries and generates electrical power by mixing oxygen and hydrogen at very low temperatures, also providing good drinking water as a byproduct. But after only a few hours on the 6th orbit, oxygen pressure starts falling slowly in one of the 2 fuel cells. This threatens to reduce electrical power to the danger point. Arrangements are made for an emergency recovery.
Gemini 5, Houston again. Be advised that we've launched the aircraft into the 4 recovery area around Hawaii. We hope we don't have to use them, but it'll be a good exercise, and if we do need them, they'll be there for you.
The flight continues, though Gordo and Pete are told to power down their equipment to hoard their electrical supply. Question: should Chris Kraft follow the mission rules and terminate the flight at only the 6th of the planned 121 orbits? He briefs Conrad on the situation.
Looks like we got a situation here that's stabilized, Pete. We've been discussing...
There was a case that if we'd gone exactly by the written word, we'd have ended the flight, whereas we were able to milk the thing. Now, we had to maintain ourselves in a position of, can we safely carry on? And we said, now look, we got enough battery power to last us 13 to 15 hours, even if the fuel cells completely quit. And we've got a recovery situation that allows us to recover every orbit if we get into a problem. So let's give it a whirl, and let's press on as long as we can.
Okay, what do you think?
As Pete remembers,
Okay, we'll look at this thing for another
There's
orbit.
no man that I've ever run into who isn't more behind the crew and will do everything in his power to keep them airborne as long as it's safe. And as long as we were willing to go by making that kind of a decision that allowed us to get the 8 days.
their nerves couldn't be steadier as they push ahead with a number of scheduled experiments. They shoot a mass of color photos of Earth landmarks for the future Apollo flights.
Okay, Dr. Berry, I'd like to talk to you here for a couple of minutes. Oh, Gordo and Pete, you've had 100 hours, 11
They
minutes.
assist in extensive space-to-Earth medical examinations of themselves to test the physical effects of long-duration flight. In moments of relaxation, they break into songs.
Gordo composed this yesterday after our system pooped out on us. And you can sing it to We Were Sailing Along. It goes like this. We were drifting along by the CSQ when the radio suddenly said, here's word for you. Your controls are dead, but you're not through. So here we are for 3 days more with the end quite far.
Hey, Pete, you're doing great till the last line. Recompose that, will you?
We'll work on it. We have a few more that are better, but...
On the 7th day, another kind of crisis occurs as Gordo and Pete prepare a lunch of shrimp contained in a squeeze bag.
And that shrimp was the thickest of all the stuff that you mixed up and tried to squeeze out of it too. And I was really squeezing down on that bag, and it blew out on Gordo's side, and there was shrimp was floating all over everywhere. And now it's really little shrimp, you know, these little tiny.
Little teensy, yeah, shrimp.
And they'd stick on the instruments, and got them on the suit, and you know, it just took a long time snatching them out of the air, and cleaning it up. And I was very mad that we got any dirt on our flight suits or any junk in the spacecraft, because that's all we had to do for 7 days anyhow, was store garbage.
So it goes. For 8 days and nights, 3 round-the-clock teams of flight controllers sharing Gemini control, and 2 men sharing a home about the size of a compact car, working there, clowning there, sleeping there. Finally, they land, wearing the beards that have become a trademark of the long Gemini flights. In the South Atlantic, they're taken aboard the carrier Lake Champlain, where an admirer calls by radio telephone from the LBJ Ranch.
Salute you both for the very calm and cool courage that you have shown throughout these last 8 days. In the face of disappointments and discouragements, you've conducted yourselves nobly.
And after 2
I
minutes,
just want to say, God bless you both. We're glad you're back. We shall be everlastingly proud of you, and we are so thankful for all the blessings that are ours. Well, Gordon, I wish you could be out here with us this morning. Gordon, do you read me? Are you just reluctant, or did you not hear me?
pilot style, he finally closes the conversation with,
Over and out.
time in flight, 4 minutes short of 191 hours, far exceeding cosmonaut Baikovsky's 119-hour record, which stood for 2 years and 2 months. Conrad and Cooper are found to be in excellent health, but could astronauts take it for 14 days? Our next test of man's adaptability in space. This is the concern and responsibility of Dr. Charles Berry, Chief Space Physician at the Houston Center. Tapping on his desk for emphasis, he later outlines the problem as it then appeared.
If you think about our flight program, we never really have repeated anything exactly the same ever yet. And therefore, you're always doing something new, and there's always that element of, is this really going to go? Is this really going to work right?
And this is Gemini Control Houston.
Paul Haney speaking.
Carnarvon should have acquired the spacecraft at 51 minutes and 7 seconds after the hour. We've had a running conversation with them over the last 2 minutes, and their report keeps coming back. No joy, no joy.
That was October 25th, 1965. The day dawned radiant with ambition. On top of an Atlas, a 26-foot Lockheed-built rocket called the Gina was to be fired into orbit. 90 minutes later, Gemini 6 was to have launched, chase a Gina in space, and couple onto it, nose to nose.
The mission has been scrubbed. We have scrubbed the mission for the day. Because Carnarvon is not acquired, we can assume the Agena vehicle went into the Atlantic some 5,500 miles short of the desired velocity.
The pursuers in this game of cosmic tag were to have been Wally Schirra and a freshman co-pilot, Air Force Major Tom Stafford, an almost egg-bald six-footer from Oklahoma. But instead of going into orbit, they come back to Earth by elevator. A $10 million flop. But minutes later, from disaster, a new idea is conceived, even more ambitious. The spacecraft for Gemini 7 and its Titan booster have already been delivered to the Cape, and its crew is well along in its training for a 2-week mission. So why not try a double Gemini mission, with 2 manned spacecraft rendezvousing in space? It will involve an immense task for the launch team to remove the GT-6 from the pad, replace it with the GT-7, launch GT-7, patch up the pad, ready it for GT-6, and launch GT-6 with its special radar equipment for rendezvous. The name of this game is Turnaround. December 4th, 40 days after the Agena bust-up, the big chase is launched. Gemini 7 goes first, manned by 2 rookies. Command pilot is Air Force Major Frank Borman, Hoosier-born but raised in the Arizona outdoors. A West Pointer, he once taught advanced physics at the academy.
A lot of fun trying to stow the spacecraft. It's about as large as the front seat of a Volkswagen. The glove compartments on the Gemini were located behind the seat, and they're extremely difficult to get to, and they also were packed jam-tight, full of food. And I remember when the plan was to use Jim's food first, and then the one out of my glove compartment, and when I reached around to get the packaged food out, it took me about 15 minutes, and we were concerned for a while that the last 7 days was going to be pretty hungry, because it was really stuck in there.
Co-pilot is Lieutenant Commander James Lovell, born in Ohio, raised in Wisconsin. He shares several traits with Frank Borman. Both are blonde, both are blue-eyed, both married their high school sweethearts.
We started a new era in clothing. It's the first time we took off our suits. Before that, the image of a person in space would always have a big pressure suit on, you know, and he'd be all buttoned up with the visor down. So going around, floating around in your long johns was sort of strange at first because you are not following the image of the people you were supposed to follow.
December 12th. On their 8th day in orbit, as Borman and Lovell pass over the Cape, the pursuit team of Schirra and Stafford are about to launch.
You're cleared for takeoff.
Roger, scramble 1.
Roger, adios.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition.
Ignition sparks. The engines rumble. In the cockpit, all lights are green. Suddenly,
We have a shutdown, Gemini 6.
My clock has started.
No liftoff.
Verify program reset.
No liftoff.
liftoff has failed. Should the crew eject or stay put? In a split second, they decide it's safer to stay put. A wise and courageous decision, as it turns out. But the fact remains that once again, a small mechanical defect has aborted an ambitious project. There will be more defects. 3 days later, the twice Earthbound team of Schirra and Stafford finally take wing, heading toward Gemini 7, now circling 188 miles above the Cape. But at the start of the chase, the leaders are almost 1,400 miles ahead. It will take almost 6 hours, 4 revolutions, and dazzling maneuvers by Schirra and Stafford to bring the pursuers in sight of their target.
Gemini 6, you are go.
Go! You hear the man, go!
The maneuvers are plotted by the onboard computer and verified down below in Houston. But it takes a man to carry them out.
Okay, I'll push the button since it's only 8 tenths. I don't want it to build on. I'll push it at 0.3, which will give us 19 seconds. Okay.
Now, over the Atlantic, 235 miles behind and 17 miles below, Gemini 6's radar catches signals from Gemini 7.
Gemini 6, how do you read Gemini 7 now? Clear, Frank. We'll be up here shortly.
It will be a night meeting over the Western Pacific, so the Gemini 7's blinking lights will offer a clearer target. And now, finally,
300 feet. We're directly below them. 180 feet. 120 feet. Holding 120 feet, Wally.
Ask them what their range is now.
About 20 feet. Yeah, we're sitting up here playing bridge together. We're in formation with 7. Everything is go here.
Roger. Congratulations. Excellent.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
They are now just 1 foot apart. The first rendezvous in space. Wally Schirra takes a moment for some cosmic fun. He stares through the windows of his neighbors and remarks,
You guys sure have big beards.
big beards and all. For 5 orbits, some 7 hours, the 2 teams continue flying in formation, each astronaut taking his turn at the controls. Then, mindful that Santa Claus is due in 9 days, Tom Stafford makes a solemn report.
This is Gemini 6. We have an object, looks like a satellite, going from north to south, probably in a polar orbit. He's in a very low trajectory, traveling from north to south, and has a very high fineness ratio. Looks like it might even be...
There are those at Gemini Control who, for a moment, are convinced that Tom is describing an unidentified flying object, until... Schirra on harmonica and Stafford on sleigh bells make it all clear. 2 hours later, as in the hit song, Schirra and Stafford are going back to Houston. Borman and Lovell remain 2 days longer in space, testing the new spacesuits and also working in long johns. When they emerge finally from their capsule to stand on the deck of the carrier Wasp, they've been 14 days without taking a bath or stretching their legs. But they've set a dazzling record as the most traveled men in history, more than 5 million miles, enough for 10 round trips to the moon. And 3 years later, they will make one of those round trips.